Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and deceased. My name is Emily Sophia, and I'm going to be breaking down for you guys the latest episode of The Walking Dead, Consumed. So spoiler alerts before I dive into the mad thick of things, as I will be bearing all in tonight's review. And without further ado, let us get into the business. So this week was a bit more of a subtle episode in terms of action. And I need to confess something to you guys. For one, you may notice that I am enshrouded in a blanket of woolly pleasure and wonder, and that is because I am exhausted and I crave the warmth of 1,000 suns in the form of fabric, and I have that right here and it's good. Also, I fell asleep during part of tonight's episode, and I am deeply ashamed and dismayed to relay this information to you, but be proud of me because I just got back from a concert. Quick little shameless plug, I went to go see the wonderful band Springtime Carnivore, fronted by the beautiful Greta, who is the front woman of the Hush Sound and Gold Motel, and actually I got their wonderful vinyl, and there's that cute little babe right there, and she wrote me a love note on this, and I'm really happy about it. Anyway, I am so tired, and I came home and I was like, dude, I am watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine on Fox, I am switching right over to AMC, and I'm checking out The Walking Dead, and I did, and then guess what? It was, well, a slow episode, and see, I'm never one to simply write off an episode for its being subtle, but in this case I needed something to get me to jump up in my seat and scream hallelujah in terms of it being crazy, and we did not exactly get that this week, and thus I have some gaps in my memory as to what transpired, and of course, I know with certainty that I'm going to forget a lot of what happened in this episode, and so if there's anything that I don't address in my review, I'd like you to complete it in the comments, and you might say, Emily, why didn't you just go to bed, wake up, and review the episode? Well, I had an interview today for a job, and I might be going to visit the and like, I have life stuff going on, and I want to get into this right now, right here with what I got. So what was really cool about this episode was that not only did we get to see the redevelopment of the relationship between Daryl and Carol, which many have shipped very heartily, but we got to see the past of Carol and how she has come to be who she is today in the show, and I think that that is so freaking awesome. And she is our Joan of Arc. She is my personal heroine, and it is amazing to see how she's become one of the most critical characters on the show, and it's only in like the last 5 minutes of the episode that we get this utter peril and this intense cliffhanger, of course, that makes us yearn for more and really, well, wakes us up for those of us who are off in more or less dreamland. I was sitting there, I was trying to eat my delicious Costco rolls, and even wonderful fluffy carb snacks could not bring me back from the brink. My ears are ringing too from the show, so I'm trying so hard. Anyways, yeah, so it was really awesome the way that the flashbacks were interwoven into this episode. We got to see that last week as well with what was going on with Abraham, and this time around it shows us that the way that Carol adapted to surviving on her own, it wasn't automatic. It wasn't as if she just flipped a switch as soon as Rick took her off into the neighborhoods and left her because of the choices that she made at Terminus. It wasn't as if it was easy for her. And because of how flippin' badass she's become in recent episodes and seasons, you know, we would think that she's just had it within her. But this has been an incredible struggle, and her going back into the kind of urban horror to find Beth with Daryl. We see her re-find that family shelter that she went to with Sophie when she was struggling with abuse with her husband and was suffering from that. And so we see how she has bounced back and has become the ultimate survivor. She even reminds me a little bit, in fact, of I would say characters such as like Jane from Telltale's The Walking Dead game, perhaps. There's some parallels between their characteristics, and it was also very cool, the atmospheric nature of this episode, and it felt a lot like an episode of like, or a level rather, from The Last of Us, which is an incredible post-apocalyptic video game that if any of you guys have not played it and you enjoy a good romp on the in the gaming world, that is an incredibly emotive and wonderful adventure that is going to be fronted by Sam Raimi in the form of a film in the upcoming years, so keep your eyes on that. Anyways, so I think that the flashbacks were used very well. We got to go back to scenes that we had seen before and see them expanded upon. We even see Carol coming back and seeing the decimation of the prison. Then we see her drawn again to the flames of Terminus. And we even see, too, in this episode, as Carol and Daryl are, they're getting creative in the ways that they're trying to ward off walkers, and they will throw, like, a flaming object to distract them. And so yet again, fire becomes it's a very powerful symbol and presence in the episode. What is happening with my words? Yeah, but no, we saw that earlier on in the season, and that theme has kind of returned, and I think that really fits in well with the idea of being consumed. And then, of course, Daryl, in one of the most popular quotes of this episode, says, you know, we ain't ashes. Even though Carol is struggling to see how, what the results of her trying will be, her trying to come back, to be a part of the group. We see further into her decision to depart. She knows that she has what it takes to sacrifice, but she's afraid that others don't have what it takes to sacrifice, and she can't bear to see the consequences of that anymore. And we can completely and utterly sympathize with why that is. And so getting to have these two coarse, hardened, and very richly developed survivors in the forms of Carol and Daryl, getting to have the two of those brought together, and especially in light of the friendship they had in recent seasons, is incredibly powerful. But now we're kind of in a place of wondering, is Daryl going to be able to make it away from the Grady Memorial Hospital with both Beth and Carol, with what transpired in like the last freaking 2 minutes of the episode? I mean, is it possible to say that a man can really have it all in this crazy world? I mean, I hate to think that he might only make it away with one of them, but there's actually a lot of people who, they saw a trailer for this episode with, that showed footage of Daryl carrying a body to a burn pile, and everybody thought it was going to be Beth, and I was really not sure that was going to be the case, and in fact it was not. Instead, as Carol was sleeping, Daryl was taking care of the bodies at, I believe it was the shelter that they were staying at that point, but, yeah, so again, a lot of atmosphere brooding, very low on the dialogue factor, so there's not a lot to break down in that respect. It's more kind of exploring this form of wasteland that Carol and Daryl are making their way through, and what those brief conversations and the conversations that don't happen between them, what the significance of those. And then, of course, their journey intertwines with that of Noah, and a lot of people, I hope, picked up on earlier on in the episode that these events, of course, are transpiring right after Noah had been released. And then Daryl and Carol have, interestingly, flip-flopping opinions on what to do about this guy who is stalking them down, who tries to be fronting on Daryl's territory and taking his crossbow, attempting to survive on his own, and ultimately finds himself under a bookshelf with the man himself, smoking a cigarette and figuring that he doesn't need to save the day. Not in this situation. But then Carol actually, she bounces back, and she wants to save this guy's life, and ultimately he becomes their connection to finding Beth. Now the question at the end is, and because I do not see the dearly beloved people of the Grady Memorial Hospital as our friends, I wonder if perhaps they caught Carol in their periphery as they were driving down. I wonder if they hit her on purpose. I mean, would it be too much of a stretch to say? I mean, is that too much of conspiratorial thinking? Because they really seem to place a big emphasis on the idea of people owing them. And so I'd like to think that they see somebody and they make a knee-jerk decision of, yeah, let's get that one. Okay, boop, whoopsie daisy. Well, let's come on and take care of this one. You know, that's kind of the way that it seems to work in their twisted little world. And so, of course, a lot of us had figured out over the past couple of weeks as our brains were working in overdrive that Noah was the one who returns with Daryl and who comes out in the woods, and they're going back for reinforcements, because ultimately I think what this becomes is not only is it going to be a physical war trying to get friends back, people that are part of your community reinstated, but it's kind of an ideological war too, because oh, what is the name of the leader of the at the Grady Hospital, the crazy cop lady? You know, the one, Dawn, I believe her name is. She's kind of a reverse, a mirror image of Rick and what he has forged with his group out in the wild. And so I think it's going to be very exciting to see the war that they ultimately have, and I assume is going to be coming. And then perhaps it's distinctly possible that Abraham's group is going to rejoin them as well. So bringing the party all back together, going head to head with the people of Grady, and I think that's going to be a very exciting battle. We had a couple of moments, you know, the moments that I was in fact awake for that were a little bit heart-pounding, such as the scene of Carol and Daryl being trapped in the vehicle, dangling precariously over the edge of the bridge, and they decide to take the not so easy but easier way out. One which lands Carol injured, but they're able to walk away after the lemming walkers drop down upon them in what was kind of a very comical moment, as like they're sitting there trying to gather themselves, get all their marbles back in the jar, and then it's just thunk, 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 thunk. And you know, I mean, here where I live, we've been having crazy hailstorms and early winter madness, and so I mean, I can sympathize with that stuff, you know. I need to get some good metaphors for when I'm talking about the weather with my friends. So, you know, it's raining walkers and stalkers, I tell you what. But yeah, so that was a really interesting scene. It reminded me a lot of Inception, actually, the scene where the car is catapulting into the water. Pretty powerful little moment there. And then, yeah, so we get to see little bits of strategy about how to deal with walkers in these dense urban settings. We get to see the remnants of society in these places that are kind of the cruxes, the centerpieces of what was once culture. We get to see Carol and Daryl breaking down this artistic piece in some once upon a time hoity-toity legal office, and in Daryl's eyes is just you know, dog that dipped his butt in paint and decided to scooch itself across a canvas. You know, it's and the two of them find themselves asking one another, you know, how did we get to where we are? And as far as the development of those characters, they see how they have both grown from who they were. Daryl is now a man, and Carol is now far, far beyond being under the thumb of her abusive husband, and she is a freaking warrior queen. I also have to read you a very sweet little excerpt from an interview that Melissa McBride, who plays Carol, did with, I believe it was Entertainment Weekly, was it? Let me see here, because she was actually talking, she was addressing those who want Carol and Daryl to be together. The shippers, if you will. Hopefully you guys are familiar with the term. A shipper being one who wishes for one fictional character to be typically romantically with another fictional character and aspires to or desires to see that relationship come to fruition. And so Gosh, I'm trying to find this lovely little interview that she did with Entertainment Weekly, and she's talking about the shipping. Because I love when actors actually try to address this when looking at their characters. Yeah, but what she says is that there are so many ships sailing. They're going to conk into one another, and it can get a little nasty, and that kind of makes me sad. They can get nasty to one another. It's just a TV show. No need to get nasty to each other, especially because nothing has happened. So everybody thinks there's gonna be a big climactic "can you feel the love tonight" scene when the two of them are laying side by side on the same bed. But very quickly does a strange and disconcerting noise awaken them from whatever might have been. But at the same time, I don't really think that that's the big picture. They're more or less kind of on a pretty important mission, and I think that that's kind of the main end goal. I know that it's a relief, I think, for the two of them to be back together and to have one another to protect, and being a part of the big group, getting to explore themselves in one another's presence, but we all need to slow our little horsies. What was also cool about this episode, going back to the ruins of Atlanta, is getting to try and find little season 1 Easter eggs. For example, there was one shot that had a tank, and if you will recall, in the very first season, there was a pretty iconic scene where Rick gets trapped in the tank, and he's contacted by for the first time by Glenn, who calls him an asshole in there, and you know, that's the beginning of Rick's companionship with the group that he ultimately kind of becomes this leading figure over, and it's just crazy to see how far we have come over the course of this series, and it's great to be back in this environment that harkens back to the origins of the show, because we see just how far things have come and how there is still so much yet to be done, and so many dead yet to be made as dead as they can possibly be. You know, it's really crazy to fathom. I don't know how far into the apocalypse we are at this point, but yeah, so ultimately it's good to see them get back together with Noah, and Noah in that last moment where Daryl is desperate to get to Carol and there's almost nothing that can stop him. Noah is able to speak a little bit of strategy into his ear, and then he is like, okay, let's do this. We are going hard. This means war. And so yeah, this episode was in many ways a lot more subtle. And a lot of people have been talking about the background music and the soundtrack for this episode, and I'm not surprised, because many people are kind of describing it as this eerie and broken and lovely kind of lullaby, and maybe that's why it put me to sleep. Maybe that is why. I'm gonna chalk it up to that. So, but yeah. Is there any other Easter eggs that you guys happen to see, or anything that really stuck out to you, got to you, you know, cinematography, what have you? This is the kind of episode that you really have to break down and look at closely, because on the surface it seems to be much slower. And again, this is more of kind of a piece of the puzzle episode that brings everything full circle. We now know that Daryl and Noah are the ones who return to the camp. We now know that the basis of Carol's making it into the hospital, we think that it's a strategic move on her and Daryl's part, and perhaps they get the intel from Noah, and so Carol tries to feign being a weak and an innocent soul in need of restoration, and then she busts in and she, you know, has a heyday, which I could totally see that happening as well, because Carol is very capable of creating distraction. But as it turns out, she is actually injured, whether accidentally or on purpose, but she is going to be in a position of being made to owe the system something. So I hope that her and Beth are able to find one another quickly, that they're able to connect without arousing too much suspicion, and that this war is going to be one to remember. So thank you guys so much for watching my review. I would love to hear your thoughts and to know how you felt and enjoyed the episode. Again, I would like to say so much more, but I am absolutely positively exhausted. And I did my best to make sure that I knew what happened in the episode, but it was indeed difficult for me to stay awake for its duration, but that does not mean that I dislike it. And so I hope that you guys liked it as well. Feel free to leave any thoughts that you have about Daryl and Carol and their togetherness and all the events and everything. I mean, again, it's crazy to see how the apocalypse has made Carol the woman that she is today and has given her the chance to bounce back and to truly live in a way that she was never able to. You know, she talks about how she used to just hope and wait for something to happen, and then, well, you know what? The apocalypse happened, and now she is free. And it's crazy and very, very bitterly ironic to think about that, but that's part of what makes the show so great and so crazy to analyze is its ironic nature. And so whenever the show really plays that up, it makes it interesting. So, alright. It is bedtime for me once this little puppy gets in the editing room, so you guys take care. Leave all your thoughts. I will respond in the comments and, you know, continue on this discussion. We're almost done with this half of the season, guys. I would love to hear your predictions as well, so bring it all to the table and we will have a nice buffet of thoughts. So thank you guys so much. Love you all, and I will be back before you know it.